And it's a white nation, got a zero quota on blacks except for slaves. Nobody else you see in that minority category is there a law on you. Nobody says how many women you can have, how many gays you can have, how many handicapped, how many veterans you can have. Only blacks. That's why you cannot get Haitians into the country, because you got a zero quota. That quota was changed in 1966 and raised to 1/2 of 1%. Where you got a few can drift in from the Caribbean, but they know you can't compete because you got 2 million Hispanics coming in every year. And that's why you can get suffocated to death. As a matter of fact, jumping ahead of myself for a second to show you what I mean by the influx and how they're going to suffocate you. In 1840s, you did not have one single Asian or Hispanic in the entire United States. But you had 5 million black folk that were enslaved. 5 million black folk were enslaved, but you did not have one Asian and one Hispanic. By the Civil War, you had 6,000 Hispanics. By 1900, you had 100,000 Hispanics. You had 100,000 Hispanics in 1900, but you got 11 million blacks. And they got the same identical birth rate. Here are blacks, here are Hispanics. Here are blacks, here are Hispanics. They got the same birth rate. Now they're going to pass blacks. You know why? You can't come into the country and fight and protect yourself by numbers. You are a permanent loser. And that's why you're going to be overwhelmed in this area. You cannot win because they can't let you get your population up. And the major issue they're going to fight for is keeping the doors of immigration open so they can become the dominant population over you. They know you cannot bring in your people. And that's why you had 3,000 blacks on a boat off the west coast of Liberia, Africa, for about 2.5 months, and nobody even called them in. They were sick and hungry. No country would take them in. The United States has never had an immigration policy for black folk to bring in blacks, because they want you to stay in a minority category and loser category. And so what we're going to be talking about, we talk about solutions in a little while, is that the only way you win is that you got to learn that when you accidentally become the majority, you immediately start acting like the majority. Get out of the minority category. Don't ever let anybody call you a minority. If they're going to call you anything, make them call you the only non-immigrants in America. Okay? Every public policy that you develop, every program that you develop it for non-immigrants. When you develop it for non-immigrants, you get into a special category with just black folk. You immediately, that word non-immigrant reconnects you with your history. It reconnects you with how you got here. It reconnects you with your culture and your past. Right now you have no past and no culture and no future. And another thing that does when you start using the word non-immigrant is that you jump ahead of all the other groups. As immigrant takes on a negative, you say, hey, I'm not an immigrant, I'm a non-immigrant. And what you also do, you stop whites from bragging about my daddy came from Poland, my daddy came from Germany. You stop them from doing that by saying, hey, you're an immigrant then. I was here before you. See, 97% of all the black people in the United States were here before 97% of all other people here are even arrived today. Remember that. Very important. When somebody starts telling you to go back where you came from, you say, hey, 97% of my people were here before y'all ever arrived. And so if anybody's going to leave, the last leave first. And the people who developed everything should stay here, because everybody else got a free ride. So let me tell you what happened between 1710 and 1712 and the Civil War. Let me show you what blacks did in terms of accumulating the wealth. Nobody else accumulated the wealth. The wealth was in black slaves. They keep flipping things over, tricking my people, for making you believe that somebody worked hard and that they got their money from land. They did not get their money from land. Land had no value. Land had absolutely no value. You could get all the free land you wanted in America. They had head rights and land grants. They gave out millions of acres of land whoever wanted. You could go in the United States and go out to what we call the frontier, where Indians were, and say, I own from here to that mountain, drive a stick in the ground, and go down and file a claim. Only time land had value when you put a slave on it. And according to President Jackson, he says that immediately a black slave would bring 75% of the value to the land. So between the time of enslavement And the Civil War, whites in America invested $8 billion into buying slaves. And when they talked about freeing the slaves, they demanded their money back. And they asked for reparation. They sent a letter to Lincoln saying, we'll turn the black slaves loose, but you give us back our $8 billion. President Lincoln, you all don't know it, he sent a letter to Congress asking for $8 billion in reparations. Congress said, you know, that kind of money doesn't even exist. That's more money than all of our businesses and the federal budget put together. And that's one of the triggering mechanisms for the Civil War. They didn't have that kind of money. As a matter of fact, from the period I just told you about from 1710 to the Civil War, 2 out of every 3 people in the United States that had over $100,000, 2 out of every 3 lived in the South. A white plantation owner in the South who had black slaves had 400 times the wealth of a northern farmer. A white person in the South with 2 slaves had a value equal to any non-farmer in the North. If I take the white person in the North and add his house, his land, his animal, his tools, and his savings together, if you own 2 black slaves in the South, you had as much as a white person in the North. In the South, up until the Civil War, a black slave was an American Express card, a walking Visa card. A white person did not have to work. All they'd do in the morning was get up and get his 2 slaves off to work and lay and wait for them to come back. He didn't have to work. On the eve of the Civil War, to show you what that means in terms of having a slave, black people in the South, on the eve of the Civil War, picked and sold alone over 1 billion pounds of cotton and was sold just to England alone. England paid 48 cents a pound for that cotton. That money from that cotton gave every white person in the United States $500 without even working. On the eve of the Civil War. So what I'm telling you is that they didn't get their wealth from working hard. And I went back and looked in 1860 and said, in the 1860s, what did black folk own, even the free blacks? In that time, poor blacks that were free in America, the blacks in general, they had 1/2 of 1% of the wealth in 1860. I checked again in 1960 and see what they'd accomplished. After a Civil War, World War I, Depression, World War II, Vietnam War, Korean War, and the Civil Rights Movement. See what blacks went up 1% in 100 years and all those catastrophic national and international events. The wealth was frozen in 1860. And even today, blacks own